Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for taking the time to attend this webinar this afternoon. Today's presentation is, as you can see, entitled Achieving a 27% Increase in Conversion of Prospects to Customers, How Footasylum Used Predictive Modelling to Improve Marketing Results. My name is Matthew Kelleher. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of RedEye. Today with me is Joe, I'm delighted to say, is Joe Turner from leading UK retailer Footasylum. Good morning, Joe, or good afternoon, should I say, sorry.
Good afternoon, Matthew. As Matthew sort of briefly introduced, my name is Joe Turner. I'm Digital Marketing Lead at Footasylum. I've been with the company for a little over 3 years now, and I am currently responsible for looking after all of the digital acquisition channels, one of which is, of course, email. And during that time, I've been working with RedEye for around 2.5 years now, from the initial onboarding, continuing to work together to develop and enhance Footasylum's email marketing activity to drive innovation, a part of which we will be talking about today.
Great, thanks, Joe. Joe's later going to be explaining how Footasylum have been applying the output of the predictive modelling and analytics that's been done. There's a lot being said on the subject, as well as machine learning and AI, and we'll briefly touch on those this afternoon. But for me, the main goal of the presentation today is really to hear from a practitioner in terms of Joe, in terms of the potential benefits of predictive analytics and predictive modelling. But before we get going, let me introduce you to a couple of things, how they work. At the end of the presentation, we'll try and answer some of your questions. On the screen in front of you, you should be able to see a question box in which you can free-form questions as they occur to you. Please don't hesitate to do that. And also use that question box just in case anything goes wrong, you can't hear, we drop out or something like that. So, our presentation today is going to cover 4 main topics. First, I want to discuss the definition of what is predictive analytics in terms of its specific application to marketing automation and marketing communications. Because I think it's important for you to understand the approach that we've taken to create a predictive function within a marketing automation suite and how that applies in a practical sense to communications, in this case email. I'll come back to that in a second. Secondly, I want to describe what we've done. I'm pretty sure that some of you might be attending in order to try and understand what we've done in order to maybe validate your own plans, your own ideas, or even ongoing operations. So I believe our approach is important to map it out in terms of, because it might not be the same as other organizations might have taken. Maybe something you can take away in that. Then we'll hear from Joe, who takes on the second half of the presentation, who will talk you through the key part really, which is how the data produced by RedEye's predictive modeler has been put into practice by a marketer. And then finally, we'll come back to a key application, in my view, and that is how something like predictive analytics and predictive modeling can help improve the management of something that I think is still important to marketers, which is the customer lifecycle, and can drive an age-old requirements of improving customer lifetime value. But more of that in due course. Before we move on, I want to say put a little bit of context around this, and we will talk much about this is going to be focused on email. And I say that because it's a question that has come up before. There were some obvious reasons for this, most notably the fact that email is the primary direct customer channel for a lot of marketers and something that we focus on. And for RedEye, the channel is the channel that provides the most feedback and is the most let's call it circular in terms of stuff that goes out, you get the information back, and it's far easier for us to measure than the other channels we deal with. But the outputs of the predictive analytics we'll talk about today are relevant to all channels. So onwards, the best place to start, I think, is a definition of what is predictive analytics. And to get us going, I'm using Gartner for a fairly snappy definition, one that I think is very clear. Predictive analytics is a form of advanced analytics which examines data or content to answer the question, what is going to happen, or more precisely, what is likely to happen. It's probably important to say at this stage that RedEye's application of predictive analytics only looks at customer data, and that's what we're dealing with here today. And the output is key. Of course, Gartner points out that, well, in the way they pitch it, predictive doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't actually tell you what is going to happen. There's nothing definitive in it. It's about likelihoods. It's about producing customers who might be in the frame too, as we'll see later, make a purchase, or at the other end of the scale, who might be likely to churn, and put that information in the hands of the marketer for them to do something about, to build campaigns, strategies, etc., etc. The second point I want to pull out about this definition is that it is all founded on data. Data is the core of what we're going to talk about. There's no predictive analytics without data, and there's no good predictive analytics without data in the right format and easy to access. And turning to Forbes, I love this insight from way back in the dark ages of 2016. Predictive marketers are 1.8 times more likely to constantly exceed organizational goals and 2.9 times more likely to report revenue growth at rates higher than the industry average. And doesn't that make us feel good about it? But what does it actually teach us? This teaches us I think very little. It's a great quote, but it's from a report which I've read, which is very wide ranging and very top level. What we're going to try and focus on today is actually to go, well, yeah, this is how a marketer used the output of predictive analytics, and this is how the data works. So hopefully the majority of us on this call actually follow and believe Forbes when they're so bullish about it, and believe in the potential of predictive. And 2 years ago, this quote actually inspired us in the way that we approached our beta product and then into live to try and produce some of the results that might give marketers something more tangible to use in case studies. But whilst that last quote inspired us, this quote frustrates me, and I'll explain why. Predictive analytics is the use of data, statistical algorithms, and machine learning techniques to identify the likelihood of future outcomes based on historical data. The goal is to go beyond knowing what has happened to providing a better assessment of what will happen in the future. I agree with everything in there except for, obviously, the word historical. And I think it's really important to stress that predictive analytics is not propensity modeling. And this quote, I think, does predictive analytics a disjustice. Is that a word? I don't know. An injustice. It's from a website it's an article on a website called techemergence.com. And I disagree with this historical context. The argument really kind of founders around, my view of predictive analytics is to use this quote based on all customer data. And if you take a key issue, analysts always believe that the most valuable data is recent data. So just to focus this approach to predictive analytics on historical loses what is the most important thing about it. So I want to be clear, predictive analytics in our world, in our view, looks at all data that an organization can plug into a customer record. And that includes real-time behavioral data, and which I believe is the most compelling. I'm going to give you an example of that right now. So what sets us, RedEye, off down this path is this client case study. We began a project, an individual project with Hotel Chocolat, one of our clients, based around a specific requirement they set us, which was they were concerned about over-mailing their customer base during peak periods, Christmas, Black Friday, etc. Because you overmail a customer base, you get two primary negative outputs. One is in email terms, your sender reputation goes down and you could have problems. But more importantly, the worst of all outputs is customer attrition. People unsubscribe, people get fed up, you give your brand a bad name. What RedEye produced to answer this question was a predictive engagement model based around patterns of behavior and engagement for individual customers. And that included their most recent engagement, whether it was an hour ago or a day ago or a week ago. We were able to identify, this is relatively straightforward, but we identified different patterns of behavior for customers who were about to purchase and who weren't intending to purchase. And then that allowed Hotel Chocolat to create different treatments and contact strategies for these different behaviors. The results, at the time I thought they were really exciting, I still actually do. The original goal was to reduce mailing volumes to prevent attrition and also avoid hitting ISP issues. But the increase in revenue that we got from the project was fantastic and caught us by surprise. But it's quite straightforward, and I think the message is clear. The analysis of current customer engagement patterns allow Hotel Chocolat to target more accurately. You target more accurately, you generate more income. And by delivering simple sales messages to those who were identified to be in the buying window through their engagement patterns, they were able to increase revenues whilst reducing mailing volumes. And that for us, at the time was really exciting, and said, we had to do something a bit more about this. And I want to use this to refer back to the point about historical data and current data. Historical data is very good. Transactional data, as we'll talk about in a second, is hugely valuable. But current, recent data, people's behaviors and people's engagement with a brand are far more valuable. And today there are mechanisms in order to be able to harness that and apply that directly into campaigns and marketing. And that's what I think predictive, or we view predictive to be all about. Dry mouth. Excuse me for a second. So going on to the next level, it then became about what types of data we would then add into the mix. So, we see this really as 5 types of data, and boiling it down in that fashion. As just explained in the Hotel Chocolat case study, for RedEye, channel engagement is key. And I'm not just talking about email. Of course, if you are focusing just on email, then you're missing channel engagement across a number of different channels. If you only have a customer who engages with you, I choose social, then just to look at email engagement is a very limiting. It's not, predictive won't work for that customer. But what engagement like that does is I hope marketers out there agree, it shows intention, i.e. intention to purchase, or can be taken and used as a guide to intention to purchase. And similarly, engagement and behavior on a website is potentially even more important. We call this behavioral data. It provides valuable information on things like product, journey analysis, etc., which can be pulled into the message or can guide the outcome of the predictive model. Transactional data has a key role, don't get me wrong, from my earlier comments, please. It gives the value of a customer and core segmentation for treatment. So without transactional data, you couldn't identify single purchases out of multi-buyers. You couldn't therefore target more specific messages around VIPs, etc. You couldn't create tone in emails. Personal demographic data can also influence the outcome of predictive models, and we've seen things like age define and sometimes increase the likelihood to purchase, and also in a particular case to increase the value of potential purchase. And finally, customer data from other sources. Now, this is often, it is now far easier to import customer data into databases via APIs, data feeds, etc. And discussions with clients about what is valuable, is what that's all about. Find out the key elements of data that you can plug in and go ahead and plug them in. Now, that leads on to a critical element and something that a development in the last few years that has gone alongside the growth of predictive analytics. So I just now, for the first time, mentioned databases. I said at the very start that predictive analytics is driven by data. And the broader the data set, the better to allow data to happen. Now, the point I'm going to make is that you've got to have at the center of what you do a CDP or a CDP-like type function, because some of the data you're going to want to implement is going to come with identifiers. They're potentially, I think we've identified as many as 24 separate identifiers that need to be plugged together. And I say a CDP type capability because you need something like that to ingest the data into a single customer view that then underpins predictive analytics. And that, for us, is critical. For us, the final piece of the jigsaw is machine learning. Somebody once said data never sleeps, a comedy phrase. I like to trip it out every now and again, but it certainly doesn't stand still. Models are not models should not be static because behavior over time changes. And what the worst thing is the worst thing to watch in any segmentation, in any analytics, is you watch models degrade over time and then you regularly have to update. Machine learning is fantastic capability because it prevents that happening. It takes it allows standard models to adapt to individual brand needs, and it keeps those models fresh over time, responding to changes in customer behavior and customer databases over time. And then for us, I'm talking really about, whilst we're talking about data into marketing, we're also talking about plugging together three critical things. We're talking about plugging together data, then we're plugging on top of that predictive analytics, and then final stage of this is, of course, is drop that data into a marketing automation solution for it to be picked up by automated campaigns. Now, this end-to-end process really does have to be seamless because, I'll give you an example. There's little point in utilizing real-time data, for instance, if it takes you a week to manually dump data down into an ESP or into another channel provider, because then you're losing the emphasis, you're losing the timeliness. So critical data on top of that analytics, on top of that driving into a marketing automation or a similar type solution. So just before I hand over to Joe, the way RedEye is applying predictive analytics in our version 1 is aiming it at specific stages of the customer lifecycle. Now, our view is that questions most marketers, a lot of marketers, want organizations like us to try and answer is, for instance, off the top of my head, which of my single buyers should I focus on to become VIP customers? Or can you tell me which of my customers is about to churn? Predictive analytics, I believe, allows you the chance to get much closer to that through an AI, effectively an AI function within a tool like RedEye. And we have focused that around, therefore, key stages of the customer lifecycle. Prospects, single to multi-buyers, targeting VIPs, potential to become VIPs, analyzing and preventing customer churn. Predicting unsubscribes, I told you, is email focus. And then last but really not least, is a function, a predictive function that helps you target to improve customer lifetime value. So as I hand over to Joe, I'd ask you to keep in mind that this is essentially a two-stage process. Predictive analytics identifies certain prospects or customers most likely to carry out a particular defined action and puts them directly into the correct communication strategy. The marketer is then able to produce campaigns and treatments around that. So that is the point we've got to, and that is the point now, the great segue that I spent weeks slaving over, for me to hand over to Joe. So Joe, take it from there.
Thanks, Matthew. To give everyone a brief introduction to Footasylum, first of all, we are a UK-based lifestyle fashion retailer. We're focused on bringing to market footwear and apparel collections predominantly aimed at 16 to 24-year-old fashion-conscious consumers. We operate a multi-channel model, combining more than 60 stores nationwide with a fast-growing e-commerce platform. We stock world-leading brands like Nike and Adidas, and these sit alongside a wide range of bedroom brands to offer a wide variety to the consumer. Our store footprint and online presence are constantly growing to offer wider ranges, exclusive products, and ultimately drive an omni-channel customer experience. Innovation is key for us. As Footasylum continues to grow, we continue to strive to drive this innovation through our marketing in an attempt to push boundaries. So after working with RedEye for about 2.5 years, we were approached and began discussions around a beta test looking at predictive modelling through our email channel with innovation in mind. We were more than happy to sort of jump into that test and explore how the predictive modelling activity could support our overall goals of innovation. At the highest level, we wanted to get more people to shop with us and encourage them to do this more often, with the first goal in mind of encouraging more people to shop with us. One of the first models we wanted to explore was the prospect conversion model. We ultimately wanted to try and increase the number of customers in our database by encouraging prospects to make their first purchase. So we collect sign-ups outside of the checkout process through areas of the website like Footer. So we were aware that there was a portion of our database who may not have yet made a purchase with us. By identifying these customers and setting them on a journey through a campaign built within RedEye to encourage them to convert, we are able to ultimately get more value from our database. Firstly, I think it's important to say, I think we can see from the results that the models worked. Obviously a good bit to start with. The segment produced by the predictive modeler was split between, like Matthew said before, it's about likelihood, so it's split between a high likelihood to purchase and a low likelihood to purchase. Overall, as you can see from the results, the high likelihood segment converted at a 0.19%, and the low at a 0.06%, ultimately sort of giving us the proof that we needed, that the model was working successfully. So ultimately, with that confidence that the model was working as we wanted it to, we wanted to test the message. To do this, we sent a campaign to individuals with the highest and the lowest likelihood to graduate from being customers into prospects, making that first purchase. We ran a twofold test to prove that the model is able to accurately predict those with a high likelihood to convert, and to prove that sending a dedicated campaign to increase conversion actually makes a difference in purchasing behaviour. So through RedEye's solution, we generated segments based on wealth, behavioural and multi-channel engagement data. From the back of this, scores were applied on a person level within the database based on the likeliness to purchase. We then ran a 50-50 split test with one half receiving an enhanced campaign with the aim of prompting that conversion. The other half, which acted as a control group, received our business as usual email campaigns. You can see in the presentation the creative that we used. As you can see, the emails are very visual, which is a key feature of the Footasylum DNA. I think it was important to us that during this test we sort of maintained that. It was important that the customers and the emails sort of still felt authentic to the customers receiving them, and it was in line with our business as usual creative. We did introduce a unique code to incentivize the purchase. We used agile content in the form of a countdown clock, which you can see just below the main header image, to add an element of urgency. And I think pairing these elements worked really well and was key to sort of helping us drive that first purchase. The first email was then followed up by a stage 2 email a few days later with a reminder, also featuring that countdown clock to reinforce and maintain that sense of urgency. This time we included a merge field for products that the customer abandoned during browsing, as well as recommendations of some core products. Adding this additional content kept the follow-up email fresh, made it feel more sort of personalised to the consumer, and just took that campaign to the next level. Versus the control group, we saw some really strong results with a 27.5% increase in conversion rate from the high propensity segment, which is obviously the headline statistic from this webinar. I think maybe more surprisingly, we got a 114.6% increase in sales from the low propensity segment. What we can take from this is that the customers in the high segment even were likely to purchase anyway, and the targeted message simply improved that by 27.5%, but lowered down the model. A more targeted message actually had a greater impact over the business as usual activity. So going back to the fundamental goals of increasing varied purchase and frequency of purchase, the second model that we wanted to explore was the multi-buyer model. We wanted to increase the number of customers making more than one purchase, thus turning single purchases into multi-purchases. So for this, we took a very similar approach to the propensity to purchase tests, with RedEye solution generating the segments, applying the scores on person by person level based on likeliness to make that second purchase. Again, we ran 50-50 split tests, with one half receiving the enhanced second purchase campaign this time, tailored to encourage that second conversion. The other control segment continued to receive our business as usual email campaigns. We saw some positive results again, as you can see sort of on screen at the moment. The results demonstrated a 57.4% uplift in the second purchase versus the control group. So again, proof that the model was working successfully.
Great, thanks, Joe.
Hand back over to Matthew.
Thank you very much, mate. So Joe's talked about how once predictive modelers identified those customers, the prospects likely to convert or single customers likely to convert to a second purchase, the question then becomes, well, what about the other models? What about the customers who get selected for likely to churn? Now, in a document we will be sending everybody after the presentation, there are summaries of case studies against those elements of those models and those elements of predictive modeler from World of Books, who produced a very significant increase in second purchases, through to Travis Perkins, who drove down customer attrition or improved customer retention by 8.8%. So look out for that in your inbox after the presentation. So really, to wrap up now, Joe's described that second stage of the two-stage process brilliantly. The first stage being predictive analytics produces the output then that the marketer can work with. And for us, it's about trying to create that seamless process where the analytics outputs the information that the marketer can then work on. So the marketer becomes more of a conversion specialist rather than somebody who's trying to chunk together a Friday email to everybody. You are having at your hands a tool that effectively is saying this customer has suddenly gone into the window to make a second purchase, or this customer is likely to be hothoused. Could be hothoused by their behaviour, by the indicators in their behaviour and background, to be hothoused to become a VIP. And then really that, for me, begins to change the role of for instance, marketers, campaign managers, etc., to be able and free them up to stop making decisions about data and start making more decisions about, well, how do I convert? And that brings us to the conclusion of our webinar today. I hope we've been effectively been able to describe for you how we're trying to apply predictive analytics. There's further analysis going on this year, which hopefully by Festival of Marketing later in the year we'll be able to present back, which is a longer term study of the effects and maybe even challenges with applying predictive marketing over a longer term. So finally, Joe, any final thoughts from you before we sign off?
Yeah, I think obviously having reviewed the first batch of results from this beta test, I think there's definitely the intention there to explore predictive modelling further. The sort of numbers speak for themselves in terms of the additional value that running models like this can add. We will be looking at running some more models in the future. Matthew touched on VIP and churn models earlier in the presentation. I think looking to identify people who are likely to become high value customers and also those who are close to lapsing as a customer just helps us make sure we're getting the most value out of the data we do have and the people we do have in our database. Smarter segmentation is key focus, and now I think that the results from the predictive tests prove to us that being smarter with our segmentation and being smarter with our data to the point of predicting customer behaviour can have a significant impact on performance. So yeah, as a sort of business, really keen to, and as a marketer, really keen to continue to explore predictive modelling.
Great, thank you, Joe. That brings everything to a conclusion. I've had two questions. Anybody want to pin a question in now? Fire away while we quickly answer the first. I'll take the first one. The question is, do you have to have a CDP to be able to implement predictive marketing? I talk about CDP because it is not simply because it's both, but it is a simple concept for people to understand, to get their head around what is a hugely complex and difficult issue. No, you don't have to have a specific CDP supplier. To all intents and purposes, you actually don't have to have every single piece of your customer data in there to provide this. A lot of our clients are challenged, as virtually every client, frankly, is challenged with accessing data and bringing it to bear. The key thing is the more data, the better for predictive. Steps forward in analytical capabilities mean that models such as this on platforms that we use can chunk through a lot more and a lot deeper and a lot wider data than before, and the output is just stronger with more data. The second question, do you want to have a go at this one, Joe?
Yep, send it my way.
Okay, what would you do with your VIP segment once you'd identified them? So effectively, I suppose, how would you hothouse how would Footasylum potentially hothouse a VIP segment through to success?
So I think firstly, it's important to define success and to define what is a VIP. So is it high spending customers, or is it customers who purchase with you more frequently, or is it a bit of a hybrid of both? So I think what we'll be hoping to do is graduate people into these VIP segments, amplifying those behaviours of purchase frequency and spend, ultimately either encouraging people to shop more frequently with us and spend more money. Depending on how we define these segments, it may be that we give them preferential treatment for sale promotions or for product launches, ultimately tailoring our marketing messages depending on where we think we can give the customers the most value, or what section of customers we think are sort of best placed to be receiving these marketing messages, and ultimately getting the most value out of them in return.
Joe raises a really good point there, I think, which is how in a black box situation you define, or how can you define a VIP segment, because every organisation is going to define their VIP differently. So one of the challenges RedEye has is to take that individual definition and at the start of the program set that up into the model. So every VIP model sets off slightly differently configured for the requirement of the client, but then machine learning then picks up and then evolves that model around the initial criteria you give it. So that is actually one of the challenges, or the types of challenges that we've been dealing with in terms of creating a built-in solution such as this. So there were no more questions while we were answering those two. So it's time now to say goodbye. Thank you so much for attending. Joe, do you want to say thank you?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I hope that just talking about our experience with predictive modelling was in some way useful.
Great, thanks, Joe. Brilliant. And thank you all for attending, and look out for the summary document in your inbox shortly. Thank you and good afternoon.